Welcome back to Big Asian Energy. Today's guest is Jackie Kai Ellis. She is a designer, a pastry chef, an entrepreneur, a best-selling author. She built a creative life. I would even go as far as to say empire, starting in brand design and co-owning a successful firm before leaving it all, by the way, to study pastries in Paris, which of course then led her to open an incredibly successful and also one of my favorites, Boku Bakery, which has then led her to publish a best-selling memoir called The Measure of My Powers. And I mean, honestly, if you go to her website, her list of descriptions of what she does is, I think, one of the most fascinating things because under her creative highlights include things like former creative director and co-owner of a strategic branding firm, award-winning bakery. You've been you've been host to different shows. You've done public speaking at TEDx. I mean, I could go on, but I really want to start there because most people I get to have on the show have certain specializations. You seem to specialize in so many things. Can you give us a little background?
I mean, I am definitely just a really curious person that likes to solve problems and also I just get obsessed about things and then just want to follow that rabbit hole. And so I mean, and sometimes they're very short-lived. So for example, for whatever reason, last week I was like, I really want to speak with an Australian accent and see if I can try that. And I spent like hours perfecting or trying to perfect an Australian accent and learning about things like the intrusive R that they inject into. And so obviously that only lasted for like a day, but
This
sometimes
is
things
freaking.
yeah, sometimes things hold my attention
Mhm,
for a lot longer, and then I think to myself, I just have this natural thing where whenever I'm obsessed about something, I'm a big
mhm.
champion of it, and I just wanna make it my entire life, and which means it needs to become
Mm.
my work, and so I create businesses around it, and then I get really excited about something else, so I end up selling it and or moving on from it and then doing something else. So that's why
Yeah.
the resume, the CV looks long, but yeah, it's just because maybe I'm just curious about a lot of different things.
I love that, and I think that, one of the big topics that I really wanna dive into here is essentially, I think a lot of Asian people, this being the Big Asian Energy Show, a lot of Asian people have kind of followed a certain set path, let's say. It's like, okay, maybe you chose to become a doctor, maybe you chose to become an engineer, whatever it is, and we usually kind of walk that path in our life. That's what our expectations are. And I'm sure that there's been a few people out there, maybe even somebody who's listening, who at some point have picked a path and then wondered, is this all there is? And felt maybe a little contained by it. So today, I would say, I mean, of all the various expertise that we could dive into, your experience as a super successful entrepreneur, author, I mean, there's so many different things. Your work as contributor, writer, columnist, brand ambassador for Chanel, you know, Iron Chef, judge. Okay, let me just start with this is how do you what was your background like? Let's start there. What was your background like? How did you get started?
So I was not very good at school. I just wasn't. I
Mm,
wasn't the kind of kid that thrived in the school system and the way that they teach. So I wasn't like a typical learner. And
mhm.
so my parents sort of gave up on this idea that I would become a doctor really early in life because I just wasn't good at math. I mean, like, whatever. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, it's so funny because my husband is was really good at math, and he would, tutor
Uh-huh.
math to other kids, and he always is laughing now because he's like, "How did you just do that in your head?" And I'm like, "Well, it's just so logical, like, it's approximately 40%, so, like, you just go, 'Okay, well,
Uh,
what's 50? And then what's 10?' And then you just, like, minus the 10 from, the 50, and then you get 40."
yeah.
And he's just like,
Yeah.
"Oh," because in his head, he's like, "You do the 1 and then you carry the decimal," and for me, it's just like, I just do math differently because I was just never good at it, and so it's just, like, more of a logical anyway, that's such a side thing.
Mhm.
Okay, so I wasn't good at school. I think the only thing I was good at in school, according to the school guidelines, was art. So I
Mm,
kind of felt like that was my only, uh, real path for my interests and success. Um,
mhm,
and yeah, I mean, there's a longer story there, but eventually I went to art school and studied fine arts. And then I went into design school and studied kind of branding, illustration, graphic design. And then, yeah, and then I just went into branding design for like 8 years, and I had my own firm for about 4 of those years.
hold on, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
How did you okay, so you went through design. Did you study it professionally and in school and then come out to do that?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I studied graphic design and illustration, and then went to sort of like a graphic design branding multidisciplinary firm, so they also did, like, product
Mhm,
design and whatever. It
mhm,
just so happened that pretty much the week I arrived, my the person above me left,
mhm,
and so
mhm.
I was fast-tracked to essentially be the senior designer, and when I just start, like, a week, and then I didn't
That
know.
must have been that
Yeah.
must have been a fun week.
Oh,
Welcome
yeah.
to design for the first time as a professional. Now you're a senior designer. We're gonna promote you.
'Cause you're supposed to be, like, entry level, junior, intermediate, and then
Yep,
senior. That would take you 5
yep,
years. But
yep.
I went into senior, like, pretty much that week, and then or maybe it was, like, a month, I can't remember, and I didn't also
What
didn't
was that like?
I mean,
Was that
I was
terrifying? Was that easy?
no,
Did you were just like, "Of course I am. I'm amazing."
no, I mean, obviously, at the time, I was like,
Oh,
"I'm amazing," because you're, like,
yeah.
too young and too, like, immature to realize that nobody's that amazing. So and everyone is amazing all at the same time, right? So I think I
Yep.
just was like, "Wow, what luck, great." I was very ambitious, I wanted to make something of
Mhm,
myself, partly because my
mhm.
parents told me that I would never be anything because I wasn't good at math, because that's the Asian thing, right? Like, unless you're a doctor, you're nothing.
Yeah,
So I was just so
yeah.
hungry to prove myself and worked really hard. I was working, sometimes, like, only sleeping 4 hours a night, going home and then coming to
Mm.
work at, like, 4, 3 in the morning sometimes, working on, like on the weekends. It was an intense time, and I also didn't realize that at this time, my creative director was pretty hands off, like, I don't know what was going on in his life, so, like, no judgment, but he just wasn't really that interested in being, like, a true creative director, and so then I ended up having to do his job and my job, and then the firm changed so that they lumped the account management onto the senior
Uh-huh.
designer as well. So I was
Oh my
doing
gosh.
account
That was
management,
you.
creative direction, and all the design, and I was like, "This is the most perfect scenario for me to get everything that I need, get all my experience, learn with someone else's money so that I can basically bust my ass, get an education, and know how to start my own firm." And
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
that's how I started my firm, 4 years after I basically started my career because I was like, "I'm already doing everything anyway." And some of the biggest
Right.
clients we had just ended up coming with me because they were like, "Oh,
Oh.
yeah, why not? You're doing everything." So, I don't know, that's
Did you experience any self-doubt during that stage? I mean, that sounds like it was quite a transitional journey.
there was no self-doubt because I knew I
Huh.
could do it. My parents are
Okay.
entrepreneurs, so I sort of understood the sort of mystique behind it. It wasn't
Mhm.
mysterious to me. I think that the pressure of doing it all without, because I don't think anyone truly knew how much I had taken on, because obviously you
Mhm.
wanna make sure your creative director saves face, right? And it still
Mhm.
seems like he's doing his job, so you can't tell everyone that you're also doing his job. And
Right.
because I'd always just been a workhorse and doing it all, I don't think that I realized how much pressure I was actually under. And these were
Mm.
like healthy budgets, like we're talking like 500,000, uh, you know, I mean, that's medium-sized, or small to
Yeah.
a lot of companies, but for me, as a 26-year-old, basically being the only one in charge of like a $500,000 budget for a client, it's just like, what the heck?
Mm.
And I remember I'd go to the bathroom and, like, give myself 3 minutes to cry, and then come back out, and then just continue going. Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
That must have been a lot of pressure. How did you deal with that kind of pressure?
I think I just buried my way further into work, but I'm
Mm.
not saying that this was when I was really young, and so I didn't
Mhm.
really understand how to treat myself well. Like, I think my ambition
Mm.
outweighed my self-love and
Hmm.
self-acceptance because it was coming from a place of, like, "I'm not good enough, I need to work harder." And,
Mhm.
looking back, I can see that woman and think like, "Oh my gosh, like, if you just knew how enough you already are," she probably wouldn't have, like, torn herself apart in order to achieve
Mm.
but I also don't look back and, like, regret that because I think that's just who I was at the time, and I needed that experience to, like, get to where I am, and
Mm.
I'm also someone that loves working hard. So yeah, it was all just, like, a great the stars sort of aligned to, like,
Mm.
teach me multiple lessons. I was very burnt out.
Mhm.
And also, I fell into, like, a very deep depression around that time for
Mm.
lots of different reasons. So, now I had this great career. Now I got married to basically the production manager at the firm. So, between the 2 of us, we were doing everything. And,
Mhm.
uh, and so I was, like,
Just
married.
for context, you sorry to interrupt.
Uh,
When you said you were very young, do you mind if I ask around what age range you
yeah,
were in?
I was, like, 24, 26, 27, like,
Oh,
in
wow,
and
you
around
were
there.
just stepping into that
Ye
into the real world, so to
Yeah,
speak.
totally.
Now, I wanna hear about this next step because it
Yeah.
sounds like there's a change that's coming, but one big question I had was, you mentioned you look back at yourself at that point, 24, 25, 26, and there were some big lessons. If you could go back and talk to yourself at that time, what would you tell her?
I mean, I wouldn't want her to do anything I wouldn't want my life to be different, but,
Mhm.
you know, I think if I could go back, I would just say, you know, "You don't think you're worth very much right now, but you just have no clue, how deeply loved and how deeply important and how deeply worthy you actually are. And that's okay that you
Mm,
don't know it right now, but don't lose
mm,
hope that that sense of belonging and that sense of, like, true self-love and worth and, like, embodying, like, this greater I don't know the word, like, power, don't
mhm,
doubt that that's coming. And so, like,
mhm.
don't stop putting one foot in front of the other, essentially.
Hmm. Keep going. You may not be where you think you need to be yet, but you're worth a lot more and more important.
Yeah.
I love that. You're more important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that there's light at the end of the tunnel because around that time, things were getting really dark, and so there were moments that I
Mm,
was like, "I'm not worth anything, and maybe it's better if I just
mm,
went away permanently?" So, I think I would just say
mm,
to her, like, "It's really dark now, but it's all for a purpose, and it's okay, and, like,
mm,
just keep on going." Yeah.
mm. Right. Beautiful. Speaking of power, I mean, the title of your bestseller book, The Measure of My Powers, is that connected to that?
Yeah, it is. So, it's so funny, I, like, was searching for the word power, and I totally forgot that's, like, the title of my book. So, I'm like, what's the word power? Is that it?" Anyway, yeah, it is linked. That title
Mhm,
actually is taken from MFK Fisher. She has a
mhm,
book, and in that book in one of her books many of the chapters are named The Measure of My Powers. And I
Hmm.
think that the book has a very similar theme to the book that I wrote, which is, learning over the course of your entire life, little by little, just how powerful you actually are. And not a power
Hmm.
in the sense of like dominating or aggression, but
Hmm.
kind of confident power where you can stand exactly where you are and know yourself and feel completely at peace with where you are. So, yeah, definitely
Hmm.
there's that kind of like through line that
Hmm.
happens in my life, and I'm not saying I'm
Hmm.
completely there, but what's beautiful is that you just keep on learning more and more the more you learn about
Hmm.
yourself. Yeah.
Hmm. So you were a designer at this stage in your life, and you were going through burnout. You're experiencing depression. What happens next?
So I finally get to a point where I'm contemplating suicide and I start Googling, painless ways to kill yourself. And
Hmm.
I thought to myself, this is not normal. Like, this is not what normal
Hmm.
people or how people who are like feeling healthy, they just don't do
Hmm.
this. And so I summoned the courage to tell my former husband, look, I did this today. Like, what do you think I should do? Because I don't think this is good. And he's like, yeah,
Hmm.
you should go and see someone. So it started me on this path of therapy and self-discovery. And I'm a
Hmm.
huge, huge champion of therapy or, you know, self like knowing in any form that you find
Hmm.
it, whether that's through like organized religion or through meditation or through self-help books. Like it doesn't even matter as long as you feel like you're
Hmm.
truly getting to a point where you're getting to the truth of who you are. I think that's
Hmm.
great. So
Hmm.
I went through therapy and a lot of like self reflection
Hmm.
and eventually
Hmm.
got to a point where I was feeling a little bit more positive. But around this time, I actually started baking. So,
Hmm.
as a moment of like doing something kind for myself, I would eat a chocolate chip cookie every single day. And I would be like, this is the moment. I'd look forward to it every day because I'd wake up like, what do I have
That
to
was
live
your
for?
highlight of the day.
Yeah, that was it. It was just like, what do I have to live for today? I'm gonna eat a chocolate chip cookie or like whatever I was gonna eat.
Wow.
And then I just got obsessed about the chocolate chip cookie. I'm like, well, which one's the best one in the city? And can I bake
Uh-huh.
a better one? And can I bake all the recipes and figure out which one the best one is? And I found that being in the kitchen connected me back to myself in a very like real way,
Mm.
like in a present moment sort of way, because you're using your sense,
Mhm.
smell, your taste, your eyes, your hearing, like that's what food does. In order to cook, you need to, like,
Mhm.
touch things and be very present,
Mhm.
and that kind of slowly pulled me out of depression along with therapy, and
Mhm.
it pulled me out so far that eventually we decided to take a sabbatical year off work, and,
Mhm.
yeah, and then I decided I wanted to go to Paris and study pastry, which is how the bakery ended up happening.
I mean, that's a big jump. I really wanna zone into that one moment there, because I mean, you went and became a senior designer in, like, the first week of working at a design firm. You then went on to transition to start your own design firm. I mean, there has got to be something critical in that moment to then go, you know what? I've been enjoying these cookies. This is what has been connecting me back to who I am. Screw it. I'm going to go to Paris to learn how to bake. Like that's a big jump. Was it truly that momentary of like, you know what? I'm done. I'm letting go of this business I just built the last 7 years in this industry or 6 years or however long.
Yeah, it
Was it that
wasn't.
easy?
I was fast forwarding. I wasn't sure, like, how interested people would be in this. Obviously, I mean, it's in my book, so people have to be sort of interested, but I was fast forwarding a bit, so thanks for slowing me down.
Just to be clear, the subtitle of the book, I love this. A memoir of food, misery, and Paris. So yeah, I mean, I got to hear about how the food, the misery, and I'm so sorry if I had to bring this up, but how did that come in? How did Paris come into view?
Yeah, so essentially, I my former husband and I had always planned on having a kid. It was
Mhm,
it was something that I always wanted. It was the only
mhm,
future I had imagined for myself was having children and becoming a
mm,
mother.
mhm,
And so we got on our very first date, actually, I said to him, "Look, I want to I'm looking to get married and have kids, probably 2. So if you're not interested, then we should probably not date." And he was like, "Oh my god, who is this woman?" And he was like, "Yep, I'm in." But then I think 3, 4 years into the marriage, he admitted that he didn't want kids anymore. So I was like, "Okay, am I gonna stay with this guy? Like, is that enough reason to leave? I mean, I promised till death do us part. This isn't death, but, this is pretty
mhm,
important to me." I ended up staying because I thought, well, if I leave him to have a child, the future child will end up having so much unrealistic pressure put on them. And if I marry
mhm,
someone else, uh, I might constantly compare them to my last husband. So I don't think I
mhm,
should leave him. I'll just get used to not having kids. So we went to this party where there was this guy that was like, you know, a masseuse one week, and then he was like, you know, building a vineyard in Portugal another week. And then I was like, "Who are you? You sound so fancy. Like, what's going on?" Anyway, and but then that sparked something in me. I was like, "Well,
hmm,
why can't I do something I want if I'm not gonna have kids?" So my whole
hmm,
future sort of, like, opened up. I'd never imagined a life other than having kids, and so now anything was on the table. And I was like,
mhm,
I really wanna go to Paris and study pastry." And so I said to my
mhm,
ex-husband, like, "Why don't we do something with this time? Like, if we're not gonna" and it was the only time I ever brought up, like, not having kids to him ever again. I just said,
wow,
"If we're not gonna have kids, then we need to live
mhm,
the life of people who don't have kids." So
hmm,
he said, "Let's spend a year, really think about whether or not we wanna take a sabbatical, and in that time, save more money if we were to do this." So we spent a year doing
mhm,
that, and then eventually, yeah, we flew to Paris, and he hated Paris. I loved it. He spent his entire time doing what he was interested in, which was meditation. So he meditated
yeah,
in this tiny apartment, and I it gave me all this time to go out and, like, to every pastry shop and, like, eat all the desserts and, like, wander the
mm,
streets of Paris, and, like, I truly believe that Paris is one of those cities that when you're there alone, it sort of
mm,
gives to you in a much more intimate way than it would if you were with
mhm,
someone. And so
I agree,
I really just discovered
mm,
myself there, and this woman who
mhm,
felt, like, deeply lesser than, like,
mm,
didn't even deserve the space that I took up in my own life, the air that I was breathing. I think I mentioned
mhm,
that before. But, finally, I
mhm,
was, like, coming into myself and realizing that there was so much more to life than just feeling shitty, that
mhm,
I wanted to breathe in life and let it, like, nourish me and help me to grow.
mm,
And so I just, like, grasped onto every beautiful, inspiring thing that Paris spoon-fed me, and at the end of that trip, I was a completely different person. I just, like, knew
wow,
that I was beautiful inside and out,
mm,
knew that, like, I had something to contribute, and
mm,
that there was such a thing as joy in this world. And yeah, it was
hmm,
great, I guess, blossoming.
wow, what an incredible moment.
Mhm.
Would you say that it was a combination of what you were experiencing all this time, the moment that you were in that kind of brought it about, this moment of realization, or is there something else that was in your environment that kind of triggered that?
I think it was a combination of a lot of things, and it
Mm,
was a slow growth, but, I
Mm.
kinda describe it in the book, but it was, the marriage that I was in was I don't wanna put words in my ex-husband's mouth because, he's not here to correct me, but I assume in when I
Mhm.
look back that maybe there were lots of things that made him feel afraid. And so
Mhm.
I think that he tried to make sure that both of us were far away from things that made him afraid. And so that created an environment that felt really suffocating, at least for me, maybe not another person.
Mhm.
So I think that I had been controlling myself and keeping myself in what felt like a very tight box for a long time. And so the
Mhm.
contrast between like this tight box, because we worked together, we lived together, so we were always together. And then all of a sudden in Paris,
Mhm.
we're not together at all. And I all of a
Mhm.
kind of walked out of this box and thought, oh, there are all these things I want to experience and did them
Mhm.
and had the freedom to do them. And so
Mhm.
that was sort of like part of it. I think part of it was
Mhm.
coming out of depression and the box that you feel like you're in when you're in depression and coming out of that, I think for the first time, I understood what it was to truly follow your joy. So,
Hmm.
not in terms of big things, but in terms of tiny
Mhm.
things like, "Oh, that street looks interesting. Let's go down there."
Hmm.
Or,
Hmm.
"Oh, well, that looks like a nice spot to sit for a while. Maybe I'll order a coffee
Hmm.
and sit there until I don't feel like it.
Hmm.
Oh, I don't feel like it anymore. I'm gonna
Something
keep on
so
going."
small.
And I think those
Right.
small like, listening to your joy in those very small things helps you to practice knowing when the big joys come. And so when the
Hmm.
big joys show up, you are very honed into what you're excited about. And so there's less of a doubt of, like, following the big joys that have a little bit more stakes attached to them. And so I think
Hmm.
that was the slow evolution of, like, learning about myself and what truly gave me joy.
Mm. I love that. What a beautiful answer. The idea of we could start by practicing following the small joys by checking in with our body, being like, well, this is something I would desire. I love the example that you gave of just like, I want to go and sit at that cafe and drink that particular coffee. And that actually is the practice that gives us the strength to trust those big moments of maybe do I quit my current business as starting up a design firm to go to Paris?
Yeah.
And how did that later on lead to the next step, which is then you coming back and starting up a bakery of all things that, took off?
Yeah, I remember when I came back, there was a lot of time to reflect because it was then my ex-husband and I sort of split up the year, so I had 6 months to do what I wanted, and then he had 6 months to do what he wanted. But
Hmm.
he chose to sort of stay in Vancouver mostly, and so I was just home without anything to do for 6 months, and so I spent a lot of time thinking, "Hey, what do I actually want?" And I made a list of, like, a few things that I thought, might be possible. Actually, I didn't wanna leave Paris at all. I wanted to stay there, but he
Hmm.
hated it, and he's like, "I'm not staying here." And I was like, "I swear you don't have to work. I'll just do everything. I'll be a pastry chef. I'll support us both." Like, I had the whole plan. I was like, "I'll start a food travel business," like, and he was just like, "Yeah, I'm not staying here." So, we went back,
Wow.
and I was very heartbroken. Like,
Mhm.
I missed Paris so much, and I
Mhm.
started baking all the things that I learned to bake in Paris. I was obsessed about recreating the croissant because that was something that I ate, like, religiously when I
Mm.
was there, and I was like, when you just wanna taste that thing again? And I had believed at that moment that I would never go back to Paris, and I thought
Oh, wow.
yeah, I was like, "And even if I do go back for, like, a visit, it's never gonna be the same again." So, I was like, "I
Mhm.
need to, like, recreate this." And so I wrote a bunch
Mhm.
of things on a list. One was like, starting a food business and a food-based travel business in Paris. One was like becoming a travel food writer. And I think the last one was open a bakery. Oh no, write a cookbook. And then the last
Mm,
one was open a bakery. And I was like, out of all these things, the one that seems the most possible is opening a bakery because it doesn't
mm,
really rely on anyone to give me the go ahead. I could just do it.
mhm.
And I don't think
Right.
I was like 100% on it, but what I finally came to was, is this something that I'm going to regret not having tried at the end of my life? And if it is
Hmm.
something that I'm gonna regret, I might as well do it
Mhm.
now when I have the funds and when I have the time,
Mm.
and I'm still
Mhm.
young, and my fallback plan was if everything goes, belly up and I go bankrupt, Starbucks has an amazing health package, and I was like, "You know what? I can just get a job as a barista, I know I can do that." And within, like, a couple years, I'm gonna be the manager of that Starbucks, and within a few years, I'm gonna get to corporate office, and within a couple years, I'll be, like, higher up at Starbucks, and then within another few years, I can be one of, like, you know, the C-suites or something.
You know what I love about that is that I think so many of us have that dream of I want to go and change in doing something else. And aside from what is the lessons that we've learned so far from your journey of like picking up, okay, smart bits of courage, being clear, choosing your joy over other things, this is a different thing than what I've heard from most. Everyone is afraid, what if I started and fail? Everyone, right? Anyone who has an entrepreneurial dream, creative dream is I love that your way of dealing with that is acknowledging that, okay, even if I'm starting over, given enough time, I'll eventually find a different path.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing. We tend to think, oh, if I fail, then I'm done. Like, that's it. My life is over. I went bankrupt. I am just a failure now forever. I'm going to die a failure on the street, homeless and alone.
No.
And it's like, well, no, you could just start a new thing and then you would start there and climb that next path. And eventually, if you trust that ability that you are capable of that, you'll find your way out. I
Yeah,
love that.
and I think a lot of it is just, like, being very realistic about exactly
Hmm.
what we're afraid of. So naming it
Mm,
because the monster under the bed is always going to be bigger, scarier than if we just peeked under the bed and realized that, it's actually just, a dog or something. So,
hmm. Hmm.
to be very realistic and go, "Okay, what is my greatest fear here?" It's that everyone
Mm,
laughs at me and says like, "See,
mm,
I told you so. You shouldn't have done it. You were wrong." And then
mhm,
and then you can realistically and there's nothing wrong with these fears too because they're very real, like, we are in a
mhm,
community. We are humans
mhm,
that need connection and, approval and, for good or bad to a certain degree. And so to say, "Okay, well, that is something that I value. Do I want to value that? Is that truly something I want to value?" Is, like, other people's opinion of
mhm,
me in this
mhm,
space or whatever. Or do I want the other thing more? Because that fear can still
mm,
exist. It's just if you want the other thing more, then
mhm,
maybe you can do the other thing even though you still have a lot of fears around it. So it's like,
mm,
okay, so they laugh at me. Is it still worth doing if people laugh at me? Yes.
mm,
Okay, then I'm still gonna do it. Okay, I'm gonna lose
mm,
everything. That's a real
mhm,
possibility with starting any business.
mhm.
It is.
Right.
Would I still think
Yeah.
it's worth it to do if I lost everything just to try? If the answer is yes,
Mhm,
then you really don't have anything to lose, and it's okay.
mm, mhm. I love that. Right. When we name the fear, we're able to see what it is that we're actually facing. And then it's just a matter of deciding, is this worth the fear that we're facing? Is this worth confronting and slaying that dragon that's at the bottom of the bed?
Yeah,
I love that.
and also, like, really challenging those fears, like,
Mm,
I'm never gonna get another job again, I'm gonna die homeless. Okay, like,
mhm.
is that true?
Really?
Like, is it? I mean, it might be,
Yeah.
because some people
Yeah.
it might happen, but is that true
Yeah.
for you? Like, do you believe you
Right.
have 0 skills that you could not find a job anywhere? I mean, I know
Mm.
I can make a cup of coffee. I know I can,
Mhm.
like, I can
Mhm.
follow a direction. So, at the end of
Mhm.
the day, it's gonna hurt the ego, but we're not
Mhm.
we are so resilient, and there needs to be an
Mhm.
element of trust in ourselves
Mhm.
as well as
Yeah.
what's out there.
Mm. I love that. Okay. So, what's the next stage? Now that you've come back, you decided, all right, I want to master the croissant. I want to create a bakery. What happens next in the journey?
So I do. I basically get to work, and I'd never created a bakery before. Like, so so
Yeah.
new.
I mean, who has until they start? It's not something that there's an instruction manual for, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I did buy an instruction manual. The book was called How to Start a Financially Successful Bakery. That was the book that
That
I
was
read.
actually the book title that exists.
I was like, "Well, I might as well just read this book because I don't know." And, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of, like, founders will say this about, like, their first project is that
Mhm.
naivete sort of carries you through. Because you don't
Yeah.
realize what you're actually getting yourself into, and so you do
Yeah.
what you're supposed to do, which is one step
Mhm.
at a time, and then a something comes up,
Mm.
and you do one more step, and, like Lao Tzu, like, "A journey of 1,000 steps
Mhm.
begins with, a
Mhm.
1,000 miles begins with a single step," right? So, you really
Mhm.
do have this, like, beginner's journey luck with you,
Mhm.
and I was very
Mm.
lucky. I was very lucky. There were so
Mm.
many people that came across my path that generously helped me, that gave me advice. I was never left feeling, without any, like, support. My team
Mhm.
was so good. Like,
Mhm.
I was a lucky, lucky person, and the fact that timing
Mm.
happens, people were just starting to get obsessed about food. There was no one other than really, like, 2, 3 places in town that were doing a croissant properly, like, and even then, like,
Mhm.
maybe just 1 guy was doing it, like, excellently. So I came at a
Mhm.
time when, like, people actually thought that you could not make a proper croissant in Canada because of the mystery of the air and the water, you know?
There's something about the Parisian vibrations.
Yeah, yeah, it was like, the microbiomes in the air
Oh
is blah,
gosh,
blah,
yeah.
blah, it doesn't affect the yeast, and so there was this big, like,
Oh my
mystery
gosh.
around, like, croissant, like, people just didn't even try because 'cause they're like, "It's not possible. You just can't do it in Vancouver."
Right.
And only because I
Oh
was at
gosh.
home so sad and so obsessed about recreating that flavor for myself that I went through something like
Yeah.
80 test versions separated into 4 different, like,
Oh my
micro
gosh.
tests, like, it was I even, like, made my own butter to see if that would work, and I'm like, "I don't make good butter." Like, it was it was nuts. There was a lot going on there, yeah. But I finally,
Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
got to a point where I was
A
like,
persistence.
yeah, and it didn't even the final version of the croissant didn't even happen until
Mm.
I'd already decided to start a bakery, and I was renting a commercial,
Mhm.
like, test kitchen, and the
Mhm.
people around me who were,
Mhm.
Cartem's Donuts, Ernest Ice
Mhm.
Cream, the guy who started La Glace Ice Cream, and there were so many other, like, now well-known, like, restaurants and food
Yeah,
people.
huge. Yeah.
We were all, like,
Yeah.
starting out in this tiny little test kitchen together, and they were like, "We don't think she's gonna do it. Her croissants are so bad. She's
Oh no.
out there because every time I test, it would fail, 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 fail." And finally, one day, I was like, "Oh,
Oh
I think
my
I got
gosh.
it." And they came out perfectly beautiful, like, super fluffy,
Oh,
and they all ate it, and they were just like, "Oh, damn, this
this
girl's
is it.
going somewhere, like, this is it."
This is
Yeah,
it.
yeah, it was
This is
funny.
it. So it sounds like you mentioned there's a lot of support around you from the people, and even those who perhaps didn't at first believed in you came around when the what is that saying? The proof is in the pudding, and this time the evidence is in the croissant.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how did your family view this? Were they equally as supportive? Because you talked pretty openly about cultural and familial expectations in the early stages. Where are they at now, at this stage?
Yeah, they're like, oh my god, they're so Chinese, it's so funny. Oh my god. I like cringe at the things they say, like, even now, I love my family so much, like, genuinely,
Uh-huh,
I
uh-huh,
can't even express how much I love them, but they're
uh-huh.
stingy. So, my mom my mom was like, "You know, you're gonna fail." And I was like,
Oh,
"Yeah, maybe." Because I'd already faced my own fears around that it didn't sway me,
right.
right? So she was like, "You're gonna
Yeah.
fail." And she was like, "What makes you think that out of everybody that has studied this, that you're going to be able to do this?" She goes, "You have no experience. You should go back and start your design business again. You should go back and
Mhm,
make some money." And she's just like, "You're gonna fail, and you're gonna come back to me, and you're gonna be crying, and you're gonna need money." And I'm like, "Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe." And she kept on saying it and kept on saying it, and finally I
oh
just said
my
to her,
god.
I'm gonna do this whether you like it or not, with or without your support, so you have a choice. You're either gonna support me or not support me, but either way, I'm doing this." And she, of course, chose to support me. And we're talking
Mm.
like classic Chinese parents coming into the bakery late at night and helping me clean the floors because
Oh,
they
wow.
just wanted to take one thing off my plate. And it like, granted,
Mm.
let me just describe what the early days of Boku were like. I was there 24/7. I didn't leave. I slept on the concrete ground because I was too
Mhm,
tired. Because I actually had like a loft, sort of made, and I put an air mattress up there, but you'd have to pull out like a
mhm,
ladder and go up there. And there was a shower in the building, so I was like, "If I lose my home, I can I can always live here." So, I was
mm,
ready to, like, and also I did define, like, what's my exit, like, what's my cutoff point? At what
mhm,
point do I realize
mhm.
I have failed and I'm gonna let this
That's
go?
it.
And I think it
Mhm,
was, after I think I defined, like, a certain amount of time, a certain amount of money lost,
mhm,
but I was like, "If I have to rent out my home or sell my home, I'll live here." I was too tired to
mhm.
pull out a ladder, so I would just put my coat down on the ground and sleep on the concrete floor. I There were days when no joke, and I'm not even exaggerating, I would be up for 72 hours straight working. Like,
Oh my
and I
gosh.
wouldn't even know what day it was. I wouldn't even know what time it was. The only reason why I would know it's 72 hours, because I would look at, like, the clock and be like, "Oh my god, what day is it?" Like, "Oh, yeah, I've been here for, like, 3 days." It was insane. Or, like, I would forget, I would, like, set a timer, and I'd be like, "Oh," and then working, working, "Oh, I'll get to that later, I'll get to that later," and I'd look at the timer, and it would be 24 hours, and I'd be like, "Oh."
Oh my
It
gosh.
was
Okay.
insane. So my parents were watching me
Uh-huh.
and,
Yeah,
of course, supporting me. So they would come late at night
yeah.
and clean the bakery
Right,
floors just so that I would have one
right.
less thing to do. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So they are
Wow.
supportive, but they're not verbally supportive because they wanna scare me out of taking risks, which is such a Chinese they just
Mm.
want you to have money, they want you to have security, and
Yeah,
that's because they
they want
didn't
you to be
have it
safe.
themselves, right? So it's all out of love.
Mhm. Yeah. It's such a funny thing, and there is such a dichotomy. I feel like there's somebody who may have not gone through this cultural experience who's listening to this right now and being like, "What? How could that be love?" But it's like, that is love. Telling you you are worthless, not gonna succeed, you're going to be a failure. I mean, not that that's what they said to you, but, like, that's something I've heard often in other people within, obviously, the Chinese culture. And that's a form of love because their feeling is, if I could keep you safe, if I could keep you from making a bad decision, like quitting your job in design
Yeah.
and going to start a bakery, then then I've done my job, because safety is the most important thing. It's not success. It's an interesting dichotomy.
Yeah, and just like yeah,
Mhm.
that's why they all want us to be doctors and lawyers because there's a steady paycheck, you'll always find a job, like, they're just worried about
Yeah.
putting like, us having food to put in our mouths, and the reason is
Uh-huh.
because they have experienced insecurity around
Mhm.
finances and food. Like, they've
Mhm.
experienced
Mhm.
wars and famine and, these kinds of
Mhm.
generational traumas that get passed on, so it comes from
Mhm.
a very real place for them.
Absolutely. Now, having come sort of at this side of the journey, first and foremost, I always have to ask is, are there any other stories in your memoir that you feel like needs to be told? Like if somebody hasn't been familiar yet with your work, what is a story that has, been that for you?
I think the main thing in the memoir is just that you just never know where life is going. We
Hmm.
think that we know, we get scared about the things that we think we know, but if we let ourselves just let go of the control a little bit and just trust in the process of
Hmm.
life, it can
Mhm.
sometimes give us things that we couldn't have ever imagined for ourselves because we believe ourselves to be smaller than we are.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, I think that's something that I still learn. It's never really whenever I've, like, allowed myself to sort of sink into the experience of life, it's never it's
Mhm.
never led me astray. So, yeah, I think that's sort of the bigger message in the book.
Mm. I love that. And speaking of not allowing yourself to see yourself as being small, the show is called Big Asian Energy, and you certainly represent that bigness. How do you feel like if you were talking to either a younger version of yourself or a version of yourself? Because in the book, you talk about very openly about going through depression, about this, disorder eating, the feeling of emotional numbness, going through these very critical moments of uncertainty. And you talked about how even like how food and baking brought you back to life at this point. If you could go back and kind of advise your past selves how to step into your big Asian energy or whatever that is for you, what would you tell them?
Oh gosh, there's so many things. I think that I would say, like, you just deserve to enjoy yourself. It's okay.
Mm.
Like, just like, back to
Mhm.
the whole, like, the simple joys thing. I think that
Mhm.
following those simple joys actually
Mhm.
creates big Asian energy because we're more
Hmm.
focused on what we have than what we don't have.
Mhm.
And I think when we're focused on what
Hmm.
we have big Asian energy because we don't really care about what we don't have. Where we
Hmm.
come from a place of lack, like, if that's our mentality, then we're already making ourselves small because we're like,
Hmm.
it just is like that's already the way that you're thinking, like, "I don't have this, but this person does. I don't have this, but this
Hmm.
does. I haven't achieved this yet." Well, how can you be big if
Mhm.
you're not like, if you always are lacking something?
Right.
Wherever you are, understanding, like, how much you actually already have and, like, pursuing the things because, of, like, a curiosity and a joy and "That looks
Mhm.
interesting. I just wanna geek out on that." Like, I feel like that's big Asian energy, right? It's just like, "I don't really care what I
I
don't have.
love that.
I just want to, like, expand," essentially. So, I think
Mm.
that's big Asian energy. I think that, when we talk about specifically Asian,
Mhm.
we're always taught to be, like, humble, self-effacing,
Mhm.
you know if anyone
Yep.
compliments your children, you say, "No, you don't know, they're so bad,"
Nothing.
like, you kinda, like, put them down. And I remember I had to, like, reteach my parents to give me compliments, and so I would say,
Huh.
like, "Oh." I'm really good at this, don't you think? And my mom would be like, like, "Oh, Kayla." I'd be like, "Not that's okay. I think I'm amazing at this." And she's like and then she would just I would do it, like, as a joke, just to point out,
Yeah,
like,
and, like, keep pressing her.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, "No, I'm amazing." Like, just keep on getting bigger,
Yeah.
the smaller she'd be like,
Yeah.
but, I mean, it's just a part of, our culture to, like, not want to get too big, but
Mhm.
thing is, like, if we truly there's, like, I think that there's, like, this feeling of, like, in order to counter that, we have to,
Mhm.
almost, like, fake bigness in order to, like,
Mhm. Mhm.
counter, like, this fake humility too. And
Mhm.
sometimes that has to happen in order for the pendulum to, like, swing and for us to find our, like, true grounding. But
Mhm.
also,
Mhm.
I think big Asian energy is it's just never fake. It's never fake humility, and it's not fake, like
Mhm. Mhm.
confidence. It just
Mhm.
is. Like, we're very
Mhm.
clear-headed and
Mhm.
understanding where our strengths and our weaknesses are, and understanding that
Mm.
everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and that we all contribute to something that is bigger, and that we
Mm.
value every single contribution, including our own. And I think in
Mm.
that way, it is both sort of an Asian mentality, but also big Asian energy. Like, yeah. Does that
Wow, I love that.
okay.
I no, that was perfect. That was that was a perfect description. I don't think I could have done it better. This is why you bring on writers and, professional storytellers to your show because they can capture the essences perfectly. So, at this stage, you accomplished so much already. What's next for you? What's exciting for you looking forward?
I am raising my three-year-old now, who is
Oh.
just he's just so funny. He's infuriating. Like, I for sure see why my parents did some of the things that they did, "Be quiet, shut up, sit down, and just eat your whatever." Like, of course,
Yeah.
nowadays, we just don't do that, but there are moments where I, will think to myself, "Can you just
I
sit
won't do
down?"
it, but I get it.
Yeah, like, I get why my parents, just would be "I don't know, stop asking me questions." Like, but, it's so it's so cool to, for example, I mean, I'm gonna, nerd out about my kid because I
Yeah,
just love him so much,
please
but
do.
yesterday, he, for the first time, was looking at, those roly-poly wood bug kinda things in the
Mhm,
ground,
mhm. Yep,
and then the
yep.
teacher, put the bug back in the ground, and she said, They go into the soil, so we can say, 'Bye bye, bug.'"
Mhm,
And he's like, "Bye bye, bug."
mhm,
And we were walking to the car, and he stopped in front of this tree, and there was all this moss on the ground, and he crouched down on the ground, and I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Bugs." And I'm like, "Oh, are you looking at bugs?" And he's like, "Yes." And then he goes and he puts his hand to his mouth, gives it a little kiss, and puts the hand to the ground, and it kisses the ground. He's like, "Bye bye, bugs. I love you." And I'm like, "Oh my god. This kid is like, everything. I just love him so much.
Yeah.
It's so
Oh
cute.
my gosh.
But, we were those kids too, right? Like, our
Mm,
parents had moments like that when we were kissing the ground saying, "Bye bye, bugs." Like,
mm.
it's so nuts. Anyway, so that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm spending most of my time taking care of him. I'm also
Beautiful.
writing a second book now, which is called
Mhm,
To You Who Wonders. And it
mhm,
is an advice column and memoir kind of mixed together. So
mm,
I put out a call for question submissions and about all sorts of, all sorts of things that keep us up at night. People ask questions. And so now I'm kind of answering them, not from a professional's perspective, but from a very personal, this is a time that happened to me, and this is how I got
mm,
through it, and you're not alone. So I think that's the main
mhm,
point of the book is just you're not alone in this. Like we're all suffering and
mm,
struggling through the same stuff. It just looks a little bit different
mm.
for everyone. So
I love that. I can't wait. Where are you at? Is this something that we can pre-order soon, or are you in the process of writing it still?
No, no pre-orders anytime soon. I am taking my time with this one. Yeah, my
Amazing.
editor is so kind. She's like, "This is just gonna take whatever time it takes. It's okay. There's no deadline."
Yeah.
So I have taken
Oh, I
that
love it.
and decided to get really good at procrastinating and not writing books. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know when it's coming out, but it will be done. Like I guarantee, because I have to finish this thing. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I can't wait to chat more and hear more about it. To find out more about you, follow your work, or anything like that, aside from checking out your cafes, how do listeners best connect?
I think the best would just be on Instagram. There's
Mhm.
also my website if people just wanna read a CV. It's not that interesting because there's no other content on there other than just, "Okay, this is what I've done."
It's a
Uh,
pretty elaborate CV, though.
but, like, you see it once and, like, there's no reason to go back. But, yeah, Instagram, like, I sometimes post things and yeah, I honestly, I keep a pretty low profile these days, but maybe there will be more in the future. We'll see.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, first and foremost. And for those of you at home listening, Jackie's story, I feel like really just reminds me that reinvention doesn't always come with an expectation of perfection. You could do prep work, but a lot of times it just starts with a breaking point, a decision, and the courage to believe that we can start over. And if we don't have to keep performing based on what we think we're supposed to do, maybe we can finally come home to ourselves. Thank you once again for this incredible share. We're so excited. I'm personally so excited to read more from this next book. I can't wait for it to come out. Please keep us up to date. Once again, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.